Hello everyone, welcome back once again. Today we have one more special guest on our episode and is very sharp and really talented in Amazon creative industry. So before wasting our time, let's invite our special guest, George Reid. Hey George, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Who are you?
I am well. So George, let's start with your background, how you can start your journey in Amazon industry and how it's been going on so far.
Cool. Maybe 8 years ago now, I became an account manager at Amazon in the UK. I'm working in the FBA team, then the Amazon business team, and Pan EU, as well as Seller Fulfill Prime. So really jumped across a few different teams there, working with some predominantly large sellers, because we were launching new programs, and then took a lot of learnings from those large sellers. Eventually left, set up an agency of sort, went into the educational space first, very much thinking about how I could pass on a lot of the stuff that I'd learned from Amazon, but also from sellers. It was definitely two-way, and pass it on to as many people as possible. So we did more of an academy to begin with, somewhat of a course, somewhat of an academy, a bit of both, and then transition slowly into the agency world where we find ourselves now. And that's moved kind of from multiple different names of the listing people, I think was one of our first names. And then we had Launchpod Academy. And then I went on to create George's blog, which is traditionally be the email which I've maintained now, that weekly email I like to share. But now we kind of settled on GB Media as an agency, which is focusing on creative and as well as ads. And then we set up Amazon Design Kit, which has kind of become my project, my passion project, I guess you could say, in the last few years, tackling that problem of how do we lower the cost per design without impacting quality. And that's kind of where we're at now.
Perfect. So you basically come from educational purpose to becoming an actual service provider to help actual seller to solve their creative problem. That sounds really good. But can you tell me how you can get an idea for making an Amazon design kit? Because you know it is a world, it is the biggest Amazon the creative marketplace right now, as I know. So can you share a little bit about their background, how you can start this?
I think it stemmed from a lot of people were just asking me, can you give me an example of that? Do you have an example of a really good product detail page? Okay, what about that product detail page? Do you have examples of good infographics or good main images? So I started just purely for a kind of bit of pleasure of saving, bookmarking, organizing, adding comments where possible, and just creating a bit of essentially a gallery, a photo album, if you like, because it was just photos, right? With Amazon, we only upload photos. There's no code there. That then spawned into, well, how do we add more value? You know, a folder on your computer or SharePoint doesn't quite do it justice. So we needed to start adding ways of filtering down designs. So if you were in the collagen space and you wanted infographics, you don't necessarily want to go see electronic main images because that's difficult. So that's when we started growing arms and legs. And, you know, now it's a case of every day the design kit gets better because the library with our new Chrome extension, which is probably 2 years old, I guess you could say now, still call it new, everyone else can go and save their designs. Very similar to how Pinterest works. You scroll through Amazon, you see something you like, you can save it and bookmark it, and it gets added inside that design kit library. So the more users we have, the better it gets, as it's a curation of design examples, which updates every single day. And there are an array of different experts, as well as brands and ad managers and all sorts, saving stuff all the time. And that's either in bulk. So let's go look at all our competitor listings and pull all of their A+ pages into it, or whether it's manually, just while you're going about your day-to-day, just capturing ideas, bookmarking them, adding comments, and that is making it a lot easier for users to get inspiration and then obviously create designs in less time. And now AI is part of the mix. You know, AI loves when we give it an example, and that's tying really nicely into it.
Perfect. Also, I also use AMZ Design Kit Marketplace for one of our projects, and be really useful for that. And we appreciate what you are building right now, and hope we see more features on there. So let's get back on our main topic. So let me ask you a very basic question. Let's start with the baseline, which is where do most sellers go wrong with their images and A plus content? How do you see that? What seller do a biggest misconception for creating their A plus content or listing images?
The biggest one is probably they make it hard to process the information on the design or on the page. So a really simple example of this is just the text size is too small. And there are rules of thumb for that now as well. There was a brilliant Cambridge/Unilever study which was done many years ago where they've set ground rules that you should basically be following if you're thinking about your hero image. And one of those would be, rather than thinking about a minimum pixel size, pixels obviously change based on the font that's being used. So you could have a really small font, and if you select 30 pixels as your minimum heading 1, and then you've got a really big font, and the actual size of the text on the design is going to be different. So we can't use pixels. You should be looking at something as what's the percentage height. So if we've got 1000 by 1000 as a main image, for argument's sake, a simple rule of thumb would be your heading, your main piece of text on that has to be a minimum of 8.5% of the height of the page. So roughly in that case, 85 pixels in height. If you're using the 1000 by 1000 dimensions. So that's probably the biggest piece of, we just want it to be easy to consume and process the information on the page. And people have a habit of just massively overlooking that. And the simple rule of thumb I think of is when we're driving a car down the road and there are road signs, you're going 100 kilometers an hour. They know when they've built that road that you're going 100 kilometers an hour. They don't put really tiny text, which is hard to read. And that is the exact same premise. We're trying to put just the information the person needs to make a decision and give that to them in the most to make it as easy to consume as possible. That applies with icons, that applies with images, that applies with text, but mostly text, of what is that detail in there, and how readable is it. And again, even if you've got nice readable text, but then there's not enough white space, we've put too much text in, it's still then less readable. So you've then defeated it. You know, we've got the right text size, but we've not got enough white space to give that text breathing room. Therefore, it's still difficult to consume. As a result, we don't consume it. So if you focus on how is it really easy to consume and work backwards from there, rather than purely ground rules, I've met my pixel or my percentage height, therefore I can do whatever I want. Not strictly true. There are caveats to every rule, but that would be the one most people would miss. And it's quite a simple fix, I believe.
Yeah, perfect. So how you can describe that when any brand are going to approach you to make a design for them? So there is a two people in the design factor. You know, the design side is very difficult for the person who don't know the design psychology, the design rules to making it. So like if you have some brand who approach you to make a design and you make your own experience, and then they don't like it for their own self behalf. So how do you convince them? How you can give them a logical reason to actually they will acquire your design or accept your concept? So how you can describe that?
This actually happened just yesterday. A client came to us. We pumped out the first design. They came back and said, no, it's too different to our current designs. And then when we got on the phone to them, we just clarified of, here is the reasoning why we are designing it in this way. And they then said, okay, next time you submit it, could we just have that kind of a logic, the thought process behind each design just detailed in there to help educate their whole team and the senior stakeholders. So the senior stakeholders went, okay, now you've got my buy-in because I understand the theory behind it all. You know, we could use testing as well on top of that to go, well, let's just see how they perform. My suggestion would be to always go with Amazon tests because it's real data, and to change one thing at a time, one image at a time. Don't change your full carousel because it's impossible then to create a fair trial of each individual image. You don't know which one is pulling weight. One could be actually detracting, so change one thing at a time to make it a fair test. And that could also then support your theory, and the risk can be quite low. You know, it's 10 days worth of testing. You can see the direction it's going in, and then you can end it if it's not working or if it is working. But I think educating is very important. The client in question wasn't aware of why we were like changing things up. It was a font size thing for them. They were definitely a product that was very important to get a lot of information in there. But if we couldn't read that information because it was too small, then their current design was never going to work. So an educational piece is really key. But also then just ensuring that the brand guidelines are met. I think one of all the projects we've worked on that have been the greatest challenge is when the brand guidelines have not been really clear from day one, and most brands on Amazon just simply haven't put the effort in to nail those brand guidelines, where, you know, the brand guidelines is kind of how your brand looks and feels and tastes. You can have the same design 10 different ways of doing it just by changing the fonts, and the whole design can look and feel entirely differently just by changing the font. And one you can love and the other you can feel just sits on the page a bit flat. People rush this process because they're very, you know, fast to launch, and they never kind of get back to that. They think it's a really small thing. Oh, we'll quickly create some brand guidelines today. But actually they don't think about the knock-on effect of, okay, if you spend 30 minutes doing brand guidelines, you have to live with them for the next 3 years. What typically then happens is you revisit them again and again and again, and you're paying for those hours of revisiting it. That is literally someone's design time, someone's headspace, someone's decision making that you're having to repeat again and again. And in the design world, more so in kind of website design, they call these design tokens. A design token is in essence a design decision. A design decision could be, if we have a button, Amazon's add to cart button, they have made the design decision that that will be yellow. They are not making that decision over and over again, because that would be an enormous waste of time for every single person every time they ever make a page. They've decided it's yellow with black text, certain fonts, certain weighting of that font and spacing. They decided what the interaction is when you hover over it and click it. And then they revert back to that with every single design they do. And your brand guidelines need to be treated with the same respect of make those decisions early on. You don't have to do it necessarily on day one if you're launching. But if you're a proper brand now, you need to go back to that and go, what is our set of fonts? Because a font is, you know, it's a small decision in theories, but it's also a massive one, because it can be the first interaction someone has. Someone might look at the face in the first picture they see of your brand. They look at someone's face, but then they're probably going to text next. And that's how they feel about your product or your brand. And that font is part of that, what makes them feel something. And that can really have a lot of value. You don't want to just go, sans serif, I'm done, I'll move on to the next task. Because every ad you ever run is then going to have sans serif. And if it's not, every ad you ever do, your designer's going, what font do I pick now? I'm not sure, you've never given me a font. So they then have to make the decision again and again. Or heading 1 font is different to heading 2 font is different to paragraph font. If you just give free rein, all your stuff just looks slightly different. So when we think about that funnel of the first time they saw you as an ad and a bit of text on an ad, and then the next time was your product page, but it looked different, and your storefront then looked different again. It just creates friction that's unnecessary, as well as all the additional work that goes into making all the decisions over and over again. Whereas instead, invest in that project on day one and go, the first 2 weeks of a design project, if we've not done it yet, we should just get our design principles, our guidelines concrete, and then everything will go back to them again and again. And if you build a Figma file out or a Canva file out, all your designs are going to be so much faster in the future. As well as with AI coming into the design, you can give it very clear instructions of what you want. And at the moment, AI is a little bit playful with brand guidelines. It gets colors right, but fonts wrong. So not quite perfect, but if you've got a bit baked into your file, those guidelines, everything is faster. That cost per design will come down and the quality will 100% go up.
Perfect. Great breakdown. Also, recently I talked with 𝐻𝐸. He's also a very great in Amazon product packaging and etc. They also mentioned if you wanted to redesign or rebrand any brand, first you need to guideline that what the font they wanted to use, what the color theme they are going to use. That first craft their guideline, then going to do the work. In the middle, if you don't have any guideline, you just burn yourself in the middle of the project. Also, we did the same project for rebranding one of our brand, and we don't have a guideline. But once we see this is very difficult, then we make a clear guideline, and then we can again proceed the overall project. And finally, we have successful to complete that. So let's go on the main topic, which is how do you see the top brand like Puma if you work with them? So you know what the creative strategy they use differently from other brands and what the requirement they give to you for making their creative. So what your experience about that?
The Puma one was actually quite easy because they had those brand guidelines. They had a certain way that could be designed. So their headings were very clear, their logos, their fonts, their color scheme was all very, very clear. Equally so was the terminology, their style of writing. That was all set in. So, it wasn't too challenging a test, I guess you could say, for our designers, because they were in essence taking wireframes that we knew to be working really, really well on Amazon, and then brand guidelines that are clearly working well for Puma, hence why they're so successful, and merging those two together, which actually meant that the cost per design could become quite low in comparison to lots of other projects we've done because of what we just said. The guidelines were great. We took wireframes we knew were working really, really well. And an excellent example of this is Hero Patches or Mighty Patch. If you look at the A+, all it is an image on one side, text, paragraph text, and heading text above it on the other side. And then flip that around, and then flip it around, and then flip it around. This style, this wireframe, has been proven time and time again off millions of websites. Yet we feel the need to continuously revisit how we think about a page. But it's mostly a complete waste of time, in my opinion. That this wireframe has been proven to work. All we're doing is just going, well, here is Puma's heading 1, and then their paragraph text or subheading, a very engaging lifestyle image, reinforcing those benefits with the copy. And that's all that's needed. Because ultimately, it still just comes back to the offer of they've got a very good trainer at a very good price with lots of reviews and trust behind it. And therefore, people are happy. We've given them the information they need. It's visually stimulating enough for them to make a purchase because the offer is also very good. And the conversion rate is really good there. So I think people get really, really caught up with this and often overlook that, the main thing impacting conversion rate is actually your offer. You see some very, very, very bad pages out there, but they're top sellers because their offer is really good, which just reinforces, we're just overthinking this. If you have a really good price point for a USB-C cable and, it's super cheap, but it's working 4 years on, the page means absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Doesn't matter. You could have no A+ and 1 image or 2 image, it'll work. And I think people really overlook that. So the offer comes before any of the design, to be honest, because you can have a horrible offer. It doesn't matter how good your design is. You're never selling that product. You might sell a few, but there's no sustainable success there. So Puma works really, really well because they've got a fantastic offer, which is their shoe, their product range, their brand, good price points. And then what they've also got is a very good structure, wireframe that we knew was working. And we just applied their brand guidelines and got it all uploaded. The cost per design was low. The conversion rate was great. Their sales are up. We managed their ads as well for the last few years. And the performance is brilliant. But it wasn't necessarily too complex here. We took in design that already works. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel. There doesn't need to be 1,000 different ways of doing A+. This is just a waste of time.
Perfect. So, what do you think? What the creative element direct impact of any listing conversion rate? What do you see? It is images, it is title, it is bullet points, A+, or it is display video ads. So, how do you think?
Good question. I think whatever gets the most eyeballs, which is that main image, the second image, probably the third image, maybe varies per category, I imagine. But those are your pieces that get, the most attention, and therefore they can do most of the conversion work. But equally, that price, that buy box also has it too, right? If you've got brilliant image 1, 2, 3, but your price is 50% higher, everything's a little bit harder. So the buy box and those star ratings, that combination is making that magic mix. Truth be told, I think the A+ is, it's nice. It's a nice to have. It really is. But is it really pulling monstrous weight? No. I think like people go for that before main images. I never get it. It gets less eyeballs. So go for the main images first, always, and squeeze as much as you can out of them before then looking at others. Equally, if your offer is rubbish and there's no unique selling point to your product, it's always going to be harder. So don't shoot your designer down and say he's a bad designer, because if your competition's sat there and they're $1 cheaper on a $12 item, then what can you do? Your content can only get you so far. Your ads can only get you so far. The offer is crucial. But to answer your question, yeah, those first 1, 2 images, they're getting most traffic. I see a lot of people will just put a lifestyle in for image 2 with no piece about unique selling points or why this product is better and can offer value or solve their problems that they've got today. But that is the role of that second image, to solve the problems that they had when they were searching that key term.
Perfect. Perfect. So, let's say, what's the tool and framework do your team or you personally use to irritate or to design any high performance creatives for your project?
The framework, I guess, would be, it always comes back to that Cambridge study now, and that was based on mobile image optimization. It all comes back to that. There are guidelines, and then ensuring that the brand guidelines are then also met. So that would be just the very simple practice of following those rules. We then use templates a lot as a starting point to go, okay, well, let's get a design out very fast. Let's lower that cost per design for the client so we can get as many designs out as possible. And we see how it looks. So yeah, does it meet the brand guidelines? Yes. Does it meet the Cambridge guidelines? Yes. Okay, great. Does it just, gut feeling, does it look good? Yes. Have we done it in quite a fast turnaround time? We promised 72 hours to the first draft. These people taking weeks. I don't really understand it. Usually it's just overthinking. And then we promise, two updates per week. We can be really fast. And then we put it to the test. We upload it to Amazon, and it will quickly tell us whether it's working or not, rather than 15 people joining a call and going, I'm not sure how I feel about this. They don't know. Usually they're not the customer. So your opinion doesn't really mean anything. None of our opinions mean anything. The only thing that means anything is the end customer and whether or not they're going to buy your product when you upload this new design.
Perfect. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And let me ask you, when a smaller brand wanted to compete with a big brand, but they don't have enough budget, so how you can describe, how you can give them a solid advice? They need to do this, they need to fix that to compete with their big brand. Because in on Amazon Marketplace, if someone selling it 10 years back and someone just wanted to start, but the 10 years guy have a good creative. For their listing, they have something, everything they have a good, but the new person wanted to also sell their product, wanted to make money. So what the solid advice you can give them for their Amazon creative side?
I mean, ultimately, it depends the business you want to be in. If you're competing against China, does product and offer always win? Probably. Do you actually have a unique selling point? And it's, I've lost clients or during pitches because that's been one of the questions of what is your unique selling point? And they can't answer it. And that's something that's really important to be honest to yourself with. Oh, well, we're American made. Okay, do people actually care about that? Or do they care about the 20% they're saving? So yeah, you can think about the design piece, but if you're new and you haven't got a unique selling point, I asked the question of don't bother or why bother. I think it's easier now to get good creative at a lower cost. You can, the design kit has hundreds of templates and design kits within it that you can use. We just uploaded a full pet kit where, you're selling pets. It's got everything you need to create good infographics, which are very easy to consume. But equally, even if it looks better, you're still in an uphill battle. You can look better than someone else, and your price point could be the same, and that could work for a while. But ultimately, if you don't have the same budget as they do to send traffic, and they're going to get more conversions, they can update their content overnight very easily. So that you could get a short-term win. You definitely could by having stronger content and driving some traffic. But ultimately, if they could just match your content overnight, which would not be hard, then what is your competitive advantage? You don't have one anymore. So yes, you can get low cost per design, which looks good and perhaps converts well. But if your offer's no good and you don't have a unique selling point, then maybe that should be the question before you think about design.
Okay, great. So let me cover this question, which is when a brand wanted to start or wanted to do branding on Amazon, so they wanted to copy or they wanted to get inspiration from their top selling brand on their category, or they wanted to just make their own self. Uh, or also one more question I wanted to add here, which is if you can go in a different category, like if you're making a design for a tech product, or what's it, the beauty product, so what the differentiation you need to keep in mind to go in the market if you wanted to win.
You raise a really good point there of, say your toys category, for some reason their content's always been bad. So is the DIY category. So let's say you sell in these two categories. It's not necessarily that valuable to look at your competition and go, we just need to be better than that. Let's make content like that. I think it's more valuable to look at the super competitive categories of beauty, skincare, where the content is invariable higher quality in terms of the best practices they're following. So use that as inspiration rather than your own category as inspiration. We see people using the design kit and they're in, let's say drills, and they search drill and they get some okay examples and they go, okay, well, I'll just make something like that then. Whereas the reality is you'd be better off searching collagen or supplement or powder, and you're going to get a lot more inspiration to help drive your designer's decision making to lower that cost per design whilst also ensuring high quality. So yeah, that would be my suggestion there, is looking outside of your category. There are some, rules of thumb, but it really depends on, if you're in the tools category, what is that person really looking to solve? And that's kind of a rule of thumb across all categories. What are they looking to solve? What problems do they have in this category? And then I guess what language do they want to consume in? So tools, is it just big focus keywords, short sentences, less fluff and artsiness? Whereas, with beauty, maybe the copy becomes more important of how it feels, the writing itself, how does it taste? That was a good term I heard a while ago, like copywriting is how something tastes, whereas everything else is how it looks. It's a nice way to kind of describe it, I always thought. So maybe that's more important as a rule of thumb in categories like beauty versus tools, where it's very factual. But I wouldn't say it's too important.
Perfect. So, George, I think we can cover everything here. So, just warm up this episode here. So, thank you so much, George, for coming on the show. You share a really deep insight, which I actually personally use for our own project, and hope people would get a really deep value about from this episode. And thank you so much for everyone who's listened to this episode. And if you have any question, please drop in the comment. We will love to answer it. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.